Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving into what you could call Japan's great economic rewrite. We're going to look at how one single data release completely flipped the script on decades of economic thinking and what that means for the future of one of the world's biggest economies.
You know, for more than 30 years, the story of Japan's economy has been pretty much one of stagnation. A long, cold winter defined by this relentless fight against deflation. A world where prices and wages just refuse to grow. But lately, it felt like spring might be coming. Prices were ticking up, wages were finally starting to rise, and yet, even with all these positive signs, the Bank of Japan, the country's central bank, seemed, well, hesitant. Its foot was still mashed down on the accelerator, clinging to the super easy money policies that had defined that long economic winter.
So what was the holdup? Well, the official data was telling a very clear story. The economy was still running cool. It had way too much supply capacity and just not enough demand to soak it all up. This picture of a fragile economy was the justification for keeping interest rates pinned to the floor.
And then, in March of 2026, everything changed. Let's really dig into this, because a single data release completely flipped the script. It showed that the economic story everyone had been following, the very foundation of Japan's monetary policy, was basically built on a statistical mirage.
At the very heart of this whole thing is a simple but really powerful concept that central bankers absolutely live and breathe by, something called the output gap.
It's a pretty intuitive idea, really. If you have a negative gap, it means the economy's running cool. You've got excess supply. Think idle factories, unemployed workers. But a positive gap? That means things are running hot. You have excess demand, which starts putting upward pressure on prices. So, on March 26th, the Bank of Japan basically dropped a bombshell. They released this huge revision to their output gap data, and this table really shows you the plot twist. The old data, that one in the middle column, thrown out and replaced with a completely different story.
For years, the official line, based on that old data, was that Japan was suffering from excess supply. This was the whole reason, the core justification for keeping interest rates near zero. They were trying to stimulate demand and close that gap.
But the new data revealed the truth. The economy wasn't cold at all. It has actually been running hot since the beginning of 2022. For nearly 4 years, 15 straight quarters, demand has been outpacing the economy's ability to supply goods and services.
So here's the crucial point. By late 2025, the output gap wasn't negative like everyone thought. Nope, it was a positive 0.45%. Now that number might seem small, but in economic terms, it's a huge signal. It's shouting that the economy is tight and there's some powerful underlying inflationary pressure.
I mean, this is a stunning reversal. So the big question is, how on earth could the official data have been so wrong for so long? Well, it all comes down to how the numbers were being calculated. And this wasn't just some minor tweak. We're talking a complete methodological overhaul. The bank updated its base year, it brought in new, much more accurate labor market data, and, this is a big one, it changed how it measured the use of capital. Turns out, factories and equipment were being used far more intensely than anyone thought. To help explain this new economic reality, the bank's deputy governor, Himino Ryozo, turned to a series of really powerful visual metaphors. He knew it was the best way to make these complex ideas immediately click.
And this is a great example. This staircase visual perfectly shows the bank's forecast. The figure coming down the stairs, that represents the temporary inflation from things like supply shocks, which they expect to fade. But the figure climbing up, that represents the true underlying inflation driven by wages and domestic demand. The whole goal is to have them meet right there on that 2% landing, creating stable, long-term inflation.
So this new, hotter running view of the economy isn't just some academic exercise. It gives the Bank of Japan the analytical firepower it needs to finally change course after decades and decades of stimulus.
To guide its policy, the bank estimates another key concept: the natural or neutral rate of interest. You can think of it as the Goldilocks rate. It's the one that keeps the economy growing sustainably without causing runaway inflation or a recession. It's just right. So the bank's updated models suggest this neutral rate is on the rise. That means once inflation is stable at 2%, they could raise the policy rate to around 1% without slowing the economy down. And with the current rate at just 0.75%, that shows you policy is still very, very supportive of growth. And this analogy just captures the new strategy perfectly. They're not slamming on the brakes, not at all.
They're like a driver who sees their destination, the 2% inflation target up ahead. So what do? You just gently ease your foot off the accelerator, all while carefully watching the economic dashboard. But just as Japan's domestic economy seems to be finding its footing on this new road, some major global storm clouds are gathering on the horizon.
As a nation that imports almost all of its energy, Japan is incredibly vulnerable to global price shocks, and the escalating conflict in the Middle East represents a really serious threat to its recovery.
By March 2026, the impact was already severe. I mean, look at these numbers. Oil prices had jumped over 60%, and natural gas prices had skyrocketed by more than 90%. Shocks like these threaten to squeeze household budgets, stifle consumer spending, and could easily push the economy right back into a downturn.
So, let's sum it all up. Japan's economy has been completely reevaluated. The old story of stagnation is gone, replaced by this picture of a hot, supply-constrained economy where a virtuous cycle of wage and price growth is finally taking hold. But, and this is a big but, this domestic strength is now being tested by some really serious external threats. And this brings us to the final, crucial question. Japan is at a historic turning point, really standing between a long-awaited economic sunrise and the shadow of new global storms. The path it takes from here is going to define its future for years to come.